not mentioned in the documentary, the appeal court ruling, and it is the case about Shanna Lyz Golyar, the case of the stalker. There was a recent documentary that came out about an alleged love triangle. The problem with that I have is there are four people involved that are all parties of the three people who could possibly be involved in the murder of Carrie was not equally looked at. And if you're not somebody with an open mind to consider listening to the things that was not mentioned, just go on to the next video. This one's not for you. Because I want, when I see a documentary, I know they can't fit everything, all the details, into an hour long, whatever, that the documentary or movie or podcast, if you will, is about. Because it's just not possible. But when you miss big things that just gives me a feeling like there's holes, then I'm going to start digging and I want to just see for myself, why are they omitting things? So I went into the court records and I read anything that I can find, and specifically the appeal ruling. I don't know if the trial was publicized so that I can actually go and watch the trial, because I have watched entire trials, to include the Casey Anthony trial. Back when that was publicized, I watched the entire thing. And anyways, I won't go into that, but I did years ago go into that. So I want to talk about the industry first and foremost of true crime network, and what this does to cases and how it affects the cases and how it's presented. First of all, in case you didn't know, I'm sure I'm probably speaking to the choir if anybody's interested in true crime, but did you know that podcasts alone in 2022, I'm not talking about movies or books or ads on many, many millions of articles and all these networks that pull this story and put it on their website and get ad revenue off of it. Absent all of that, it was well over $1 billion for 1 year alone for podcast alone, ad revenue from true crime. So true crime is a big industry. And so what that does is when they get a hold of a story, they're going to present it in a way that is most sensationalized, that will bring in the most clicks and the most interest, and not really expose things that can punch holes into their case. And here you are, the defendant, who is the person who's going to be treated by a judge who's got a huge spotlight on him, because this is a very sensationalized case and they're making billions of dollars off of it. What if that judge feels like these cops weren't fair? You think that just make people go crazy if they've already been, this person, whoever it is, has been convicted already in the public eye. That puts a lot of pressure on a judge. And I'm not saying judges don't have the ability to just do their job with fairness, but when I see this appeal record, I just think, man, Nebraska is one messed up state. Speaking of which, their life without is the same thing as life. It doesn't even make sense. And did you know that according to the United States Constitution, a person is supposed to be convicted by a jury of their peers, and that includes the sentencing. But in the state of Nebraska, a parole board has the ability of commuting a sentence to a term of years. Now, granted, a governor in most states, if a person who's been like committed to death or whatever, they can commute their sentence. They can even give them a pardon. But they do things favorable for the defendant, not against them. But the parole boards across our nation have the ability to, once they serve, a minimum of whatever that they have to serve, if they have eligibility for parole, they have the ability to say, you know what, we're not going to let you out. We'll come see you in another 2 years or 5 years or whatever. But they can only pass them off until the end of their sentence. And in most states, life is 25 years. In many states across America, a lot of people think if you get life, you're never going to see the daylight again. But actually, life is 25 years. And then it's just different, whatever state statute that they have. But in the state of Nebraska, they had some problems. The United States or the Nebraska Supreme Court ruled, and they had senators got involved about their statutes. And the Supreme Court ruled in 2014, and then again in 2015, that a sentence in Nebraska is no different of life is no different than life without. So, anyways, don't even know why they threw the without on there, but for a parole board to have ability to commute a sentence to a term of years, that just doesn't even seem like the authority that a parole board should have, really. Anywho, but what's the purpose of a jury if a parole board is just going to go and do what they want? And it also opens the door for discriminatory practices, but I'm not going to get caught up in that. So let's get into the facts of the case. In case you haven't heard of it, there was a guy. His name was Dave Krupa, and he was a guy who was I don't remember if he was married or he was with a woman named Amy, and he had children by her, and they split up, and then he started going to the online dating website and met a lady, and her name was Lyz, what she went by, Golyar, and her real name is Stalker Lyz Golyar. And he made it clear, according to him in a documentary, that he's not committed. He just wants to have casual. He doesn't want to get serious. He's going to not date exclusively, meaning date other people. And, that was their understanding. And what they don't mention in this documentary, or in anywhere on any of the media websites that I have seen, which I find very problematic. Did you know, in case you watched this case or are familiar with this case already, she dated Todd Butterall since 2010. This woman is dating a man who believes that he's exclusive with her. They have a very serious relationship, according to him, which I find him suspect number 3. Okay, and I'm not accusing him. I'm just saying, as a person who is trying to weigh all the facts, I find issue with 3 people. That is Dave, Todd, and Lyz. Now, Todd is dating exclusively, according to him, this woman named Lyz since 2010. 3 years, or at least 2 years before she meets up with Dave. So for whatever reason, she's, meeting a guy on the internet dating website. So Dave and Lyz meet up and they date casually. Then he meets somebody named Carrie. And she's the one who ended up being murdered. And this Carrie, he really likes, and he is with her the very last moments that the last proof of life was present. Okay, so he claims that he made it clear to Carrie that she and he are casual. And so then all of a sudden, she starts sending these messages about wanting to move in with him. And he's confused about why that would be. And then conveniently, because she didn't get what she wanted, she tells him she's breaking up with him. And from then on, after that, she says she's going to break up with him. She just basically starts tormenting these 2 people named Dave and Lyz simultaneously and at the same time for a long period of time. So here's the problem that I have to blame and look at and consider who did it. Only Lyz. Only Lyz was considered. At no time, from anything that I have seen or heard, was either Todd Butterall or Dave considered a suspect. So I want to share the facts of why I consider both of those of a possible being a part of the problem. So, the day she disappeared, now I'm going to share in the link in the description of this video the appeal ruling. So where I pulled some of these facts was from what was in the record. Now, I believe the way that the appeal court ruled it was pretty unfair to a defendant, any defendant, the way they processed their analysis, the rule of law and their analysis, and I'll go into that. So on the morning Carrie disappeared, here's what happened. Liz had a project at her work, okay? And according to Carrie's the one that had a work project. So Carrie and Dave were together the morning of November 13th. They'd spent the night together, okay? And prior to that night, this person named Liz, who's now convicted, showed up at the apartment or whatever of Dave and wanted to pick up something that was in his apartment. And the way he discussed it in the most recent documentary was very casually, just that, well, she was there, she was wanting, she knew that, Carrie was with them and she just happened to come over wanting something. He said he felt that was uncomfortable, not appropriate, like, she should have waited until he wasn't with her to pick up the item. At no time does he say in this documentary that she was crying and, like begging. I mean, the way they presented at the trial was that she was crying and carrying on. Like, it was way more than what he presented in the documentary. So I had a problem with that inconsistency. Okay. So, and at that time, allegedly, Liz, Carrie said she's leaving. She's going to leave because she felt uncomfortable. She just wanted to leave. So she left. And according to Liz, Carrie said something hatefully to her. Now, this is being said by Dave. This is being repeated that Liz accused Carrie of saying something to her as she was leaving. Okay, that's coming out of his mouth. So the problem with that is they were not friends. So how is it that Carrie died in the passenger seat of her car? That's where she was stabbed to death. They found blood underneath the car was completely cleaned. But when they tore the seat cover off of the passenger seat, they tore it underneath the driver's seat where they would expect an owner of the car to be in the driver's seat.
I want to pause that right there because I also forgot to mention this. The car is immaculately cleaned so that there's no fingerprints, DNA left of any kind, to include stripping Dave's all his DNA from that car. So why on earth would she be so stupid to leave a tin of mints that had her fingerprints on it? That looks more like somebody planted something. Because I'm sorry, you go to all this trouble, so there's a pattern here of consistently using all this effort to try to mask VPNs and using spoof services and then stupid direct things. Like, why would you clean a car of all your DNA and leave a mint can with your fingerprint on it? And again, Dave could have easily had gotten that item from her purse or whatever and put it there because he was still with her and dating her during the time of her murder.
There was no blood. But when they removed the cover from the passenger seat, that's where they found the blood. So let's think about why on earth would a person that owns a car be sitting in the passenger seat of the car? How on earth did Liz manage to get Carrie into a car with a knife? Right? I could see if she had her at gunpoint, she could scare her to getting into the car. But having a knife and trying to drive a car while the person's in the passenger seat. So this was where, in my mind, I'm like, okay, it is very typical and common for a man to drive a car. If I'm on a date, and a man, I'll let him drive, even if it's my car. So I could see Dave driving, and that would be the only logical reason for Carrie to be in the passenger seat when she died. I think, honestly, Carrie might have been trying, and this is my theory of Dave being the suspect, that Carrie didn't want to deal with the drama, that whole scenario, because the fact that she left that night when, Liz showed up, she just wasn't comfortable. She didn't, she just, I guess, chose not to, you know, do this kind of relationship and was trying to leave him. And this is a theory, okay? It's not an accusation. It's just that because of the things that I'm going to discuss are just, to me, look like holes in the case. And so at 6:15 a.m., the last physical voice contact that Carrie had was with her employer. She didn't text her employer, she didn't email her employer, she called her employer, according to her employer, to, to discuss the project that she was working on. Then, okay, so she's with him at 6:15 a.m. after they stay the night, okay, on November, that would have been November the 12th. So the morning of the 13th, 2012, at 6:15 a.m., she made that phone call. And thereafter, at 6:20 a.m., he claimed to leave for work. Okay, so Dave claimed to leave Carrie at his apartment at 6:20 a.m. 5 minutes after she calls and discusses the work, he claims to have left. And then there was some text message and email after that, about a half hour later at 6:39. All of a sudden, everything switches with her shortly after he allegedly leaves for work.
Now all of a sudden he's a victim.
She starts making text messages and emails that was completely inconsistent with her phone call that she had made. So that's why I really have a problem. He's the last person, the last communication she was with him. Let's talk about the SD card. So the fact that it's not discussed in the documentary that from 2010 until 2015, so we're talking 5 years, this Liz character is dating Todd. And she's having a casual relationship with this Dave guy for a period of time. And living with him, staying the night with him on some occasions. So how is it that Todd did not know about her? He's been with her since 2010. You've been with this woman for 3 years now, and you don't know that she's staying the night with another man.
Right.
Come on now. So this is why I look at him as a little sus, okay? Because it was his conversation to say that she never made any accusations of anybody stalking her, okay? And that looks a little sus. Why would she not mention anything about being stalked when she had all kinds of threats being made against her, allegedly by this Carrie who disappeared? So that could have just been him deflecting. That easily he could have been seen as somebody who was the jealous person, because Carrie, Liz, and Dave, allegedly all three, were casual romantically involved. But Todd is the only person who claimed to have an exclusive relationship with one of the parties. So that's why I think this is a square, not a triangle. And there was the situation about the SD card. Okay, we're talking thousands of emails and thousands of text messages for this period of time that went on. Okay, all of them had this extra effort of using VPNs to hide the IP location, spoof services. The only thing that revealed any location was Todd's house. And in one of those occasions, there was email or text sent near Todd's house. So the fact, why be near Todd's house and not in Todd's house? If she was using his Wi-Fi or his, exposing herself to his location, why on earth would you be near her house? It seems more logical that Dave was seeing Liz at Todd's house when he's at work, because he knew that she's dating this guy. He was like buying her stuff, letting her live with him after her house was burned down, okay? And
He was doing
So-
a lot of stuff for way before then.
He could easily have gone near that home and sent an email, because why would she not be inside the house sending something instead of near the house sending something? It just doesn't add up. So then you have the SD card. The SD card was erased, and it didn't state in the documentary, it didn't state in the all the media articles, that the fact was that tablet that SD card was in, Dave had possession of that SD card, and Dave had possession of that tablet. And they don't tell you in the documentary or the articles that, did you know that tablet belonged to Dave? It was his tablet. It was his property. And so in the appeal court, it presented that it was actually, acknowledged that that was in fact Dave's tablet. And he had a SD card that was scraped, of deleted all files on it, and he had possession of it. There was no explanation by him or anyone presenting that documentary why. Why did he have Liz's SD card? And how is it there's no discussion on whether or not, while he's staying with her, they're both getting crazy messages from some alleged Carrie? There's no, okay, so at that time, Carrie's dead and she's got the man. So the jealousy theory doesn't add up to me. If she's literally, we're talking from, 2 years later, of all this time this is going on, she's got Dave. They're dating. She's with him. Carrie's dead. So why would she have a jealous vengeance to be sending all these crazy messages to Dave? It seems more like Dave, the theory that Dave, as a suspect, is in the same house where she is, and because he killed her, is making it look like this crazy Carrie's still out there, okay? Because her body's not been found. This crazy Carrie is still out there, and he's got to keep up this image that, he's the victim, not the killer. And so while he's sitting there in the same house, she could have been asleep. He could have been taking both their phones and sending a message. So this is where I need proof that since he was still dating her during all this time, why was these phones not pinged to show that they were actually at the same location when these messages were being sent to both of them? You know what I'm saying? That's not there. There's no possibility of anybody being a suspect but the woman, okay? And it doesn't add up. She got the man. She's dating him. Now, what the appeal court did to try to kind of get over that, I'm going to read you, and I'll put the link in the description. It's going to talk about that. It's going to mention that. And so you have from 2010, September 2010 to September 2015, Todd dated Liz for 5 years. Okay, so she was murdered. Carrie was murdered on November 13th, 2012. So for 3 years after Carrie's dead, if Liz killed Carrie, she already knows she's dead. She's no longer in the picture, and she's dating Dave. Okay, she still continues to date Dave. But what they say in the appeal record was that, so Liz and Krupa broke off the relationship in early August 2013. And then it was after that the fire was reported. And her pets died in the fire. And then that's when the messages started coming saying, I'm not lying, I set that nasty blah 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 house on fire, and I hope that blah 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 and the kids die in it. There's no research or investigation on to prove where she was. She wasn't, according to her, she wasn't even there. She was gone. She left the day before the fire and didn't come back till that morning. And there's no looking into her alibi to prove that she wasn't even there when the fire was started. Okay, so here's the problem I have with the appeal. They're saying that the appeal lawyer, this guy whoever it was who did her trial, was horrible. Not one pretrial motion, according to the appeal court. They acknowledged that there was no pretrial motions, no asking for forensic evidence and research investigation. This public defender's like, you know what, we're not going to spend the state's money. The public media is all making her out to be guilty. She's going to be, Friday, she's done. So we're not going to spend the money. They could have investigated or demanded investigation into where was she when these text messages, where was these phones pinging? Okay, where was she when the fire happened? Is there any way to prove that as she said, she was not there? If she wasn't at that house, she had left the day before, her phone would have pinged at another location. No effort whatsoever to try to prove that she was not even at that house, right? So there was just things that this lawyer could have done. So then you have the appeal lawyer, and the appeal lawyer argued that that it was insufficient insufficient representation by her trial attorney for not, looking up for witnesses or alibis or doing investigative work that could have proved her innocence. And then the appeal court rightfully said, well, you didn't even mention possible witnesses or possible alibis. If you're going to argue that there wasn't sufficient investigation, then you have to have something to back that up that could have exonerated her. And it didn't even bother to do that. That to me was just,
Going through the motions.
that was
That's all
inefficient
that appeal was.
representation. If you're going to argue to an appeal court, this client's trial attorney was just really inefficient. He didn't even argue her alibi. Then you're going to argue with that. For example, Your Honor of the appeal court, they could have pinged her. They could have pinged her phone to see where she was. If she actually did leave the day before, wasn't at the house, with her kids, she was somewhere else. She had left the day before. You could have pinged that because that evidence could have exonerated her. But when there's no investigation, the appeal lawyer was basically saying that this was, without saying discriminatory, was basically saying that there wasn't a fair investigation. He didn't argue it properly. And really and truly, the fact that this guy who claimed that he was exclusively dating her, he had definitely, if anybody had jealous motive, it would be him. Because not only did, when she came up missing, did the stuff, all these crazy text messages continue, this guy dated this woman exclusively and then took her in and whatnot. He was like helping pay her bills. He was very committed to this woman. He was helping with the kids. He was, paying for her stuff. But she just didn't treat him like he was exclusive. If anybody had jealous motive, he did. Like, he's the one that should have been, treated exclusively. He could have been the one that was jealous. But my main issue to look at Dave is how he presented himself in the documentary was completely different than what was presented at trial. At trial, they sensationalized her to make it look like she was jealous by saying she went to his apartment when Carrie was with him and he was crying, she was crying, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't say that in the documentary. Okay? And then not only that, did you know that after this alleged incident of her showing up and crying and carrying on, he still dated her. He was still with her. She was that unstable, not accepting his situation of wanting to be casual. Why is he still dating her? Obviously, that's a reason to break it off, because I'm like, you show up when I'm with another girl and we're supposed to be casual and you crying and carrying on, and he still dates her for a long period of time. So that's a problem. And he's the last person that is confirmed was with her on her last proof of life, and that morning of November 13th at 6-something a.m. And then everything after that last phone call she made, stuff changes. So then let's talk about the shower curtain and the debit card. Now keep in mind, thousands of text messages and emails, every single time, thousands of them, they go to the trouble of using a VPN and a spoof, okay, spoof services, so they can't track who's sending them. But if she's going to all that trouble to mask who's doing stuff, then how on earth is she going to put herself in direct contact with the murder victim? Allegedly, and they don't talk about this that I recall in the documentary, she contacted, allegedly, Carrie's mother, not by phone, but by text message. Texting her mother saying that this person named Liz is going to be, who purchased a shower curtain with her debit card, is going to pick up the item from her. That is so stupid. Why would you go all this trouble to mask your calls and then you're directly putting yourself in contact with the victim's mother? That seems more like direct framing somebody, okay? And so that shower curtain was in her apartment,
Send a
or
text
wherever it was
message
she was
allegedly
staying.
from Liz.
A black and white
Put her on
flower shower
the
curtain was one of the items purchased. That seems more like framing somebody. So let's just go with a different theory than what's been presented. Let's just say, theorize that Dave is with this woman, and you know she doesn't go to work, so they could have had an argument, right, or whatever. She was going to leave him, but for whatever reason, she's in her car, but she's in the passenger seat. That sounds like somebody that went willingly with whoever killed her. Because I'm sorry, if you try to get me to get in a car with you, if I'm at gunpoint, maybe, but knife, I'm just gonna run. Or well, I probably couldn't run, but I'm just saying, an average person is probably not gonna get in a car because somebody has a knife. I mean, I don't know. Maybe she was just scared and she just got in the car with her. But that time period, okay, that she sends this message is very shortly after she left, or he allegedly left for work. So he was directly with her. So she calls her mother, Carrie's mother, and says, "Hey, you know, my friend Liz, you know, she's made these purchases and she's gonna, uh, you know, get this item. Let her pick it up." That doesn't that doesn't that doesn't even that just it obviously that would raise suspicion. That just sounds so planted and so trying to frame somebody. Anyways, so she has that in fact she did end up with that shower curtain. Liz had full access to Todd's Wi-Fi. She had 24/7 access to that Wi-Fi in his home. So why would she be near his home? Okay, to send messages that just doesn't even add up. Why, again, when Carrie's dead, why? Why would the emails and the texts continue when she's dating? So what the appeal court said was there was 2 incidents of vandalism that happened when allegedly Dave started having less interest in her. So that's how they kind of theorize in their mind of why these were continuing to happen. Why would, if Carrie's dead, why would these messages continue? And they're thinking in their mind, well, because he was having less interest in them, or they were having problems, so then she, to lure him back in, would start sending his messages. But there's a problem with that. That's not even accurate information. These text messages and emails went on daily. So it wasn't just when those 2 incidents of vandalism when he was allegedly less interested in her. This went on for months. Months this went on. And allegedly this Todd person was in the situation of people being victims. So allegedly this Butterall guy, Todd, the guy that he says he was the only one exclusive, was getting messages from this Carrie person. I just can't imagine him speaking anything well of her after, he's acting like he's totally exclusive with her and, spending money on her and her kids. And he's probably pretty angry. I don't think he would ever say anything bother her, but I don't know. He could just be a complete victim of this Liz character as well. But I just think that there's just too many things that just don't add up. And I have a big problem with the SD card. Okay, so allegedly there was about 3,000 or more photos that was on that SD card, and some of the evidence was found not just on the SD card, but in her phone that they had been deleted. Okay, so I guess they had found the original phone and had taken pictures, but the problem with that is the phone was deleted, the SD card was deleted, and he had possession of that SD card. And he was dating her. He was with her, staying the night with her during some of the times that those messages were happening. Like literally, they're both getting messages at the same time. And no investigation on where were each of those phones that was receiving message from this alleged Carrie, where was the Carrie phone pinged from? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Even people, I read comments on these videos online about, well, why were they cherry picking pinging, investigating pinging stuff? Okay, and the only one they even looked at was the one where she was near Liz's house. Why would Liz send something near her house? Why wouldn't she just be in her house sending it? You know what I'm saying? If she wanted to be outside of Todd's presence, she could just go in the bathroom and send it. Why would she be near her house? That sounds more like Dave was using, trying to set her up to make it look like he obviously couldn't be inside the house because Todd is home and he's with, the girl that he was dating. I'm just like, they're just holes. It just doesn't add up. And the fact that they didn't do any investigation whatsoever. And she had a horrible representation in not only a trial, but even for her appeal case. And then they just said that, well, they're just, I'm gonna read it to you. This is how they analyzed, and it just doesn't seem fair to like anybody. Assignments from error. Golyar assigns and argues that the evidence of trial is insufficient to prove the elements of first-degree murder and second-degree arson. She also contends her trial counsel provided ineffective assistance by not adequately advising her on her right to jury trial, failing to move to sever charges against her, failing to file any pretrial motions, which that in itself, nobody doesn't file anything pretrial for a murder. Oh my gosh, that's just horrible. No pretrial motions whatsoever? Are you kidding me? Anyways, waiving objections to the vast majority of evidence. So basically, not objecting is almost like deemed admittance. Not one single objection to the vast majority of evidence introduced by the state? What the heck? Failing to put on any sort of defense and or investigate potential witnesses and alibis. Failing to call an expert to rebut the pathologist's testimony. I'm just like, okay, let's talk about number 4 and 5. Waiving objections to vast majority of evidence means basically there's conflict of evidence. Failed to put on any sort of defense or investigate potential witnesses and alibis. This is where the whole fire thing was a big thing used at trial to convince a jury that she burned her own pets, she set her own house on fire. Okay, so it would be easily provable
All her
if
possessions, her baby,
as she said, she wasn't even
kids,
home, she had left the
pictures,
day before.
everything.
That's provable
That's
because
crazy.
she would have had her phone with her. She could have pinged where her phone was to prove that she in fact was not even there. Her children weren't there during that fire. That's like there was no contest that her children was not there during that fire. That's why only her pets died. She left with her kids the day before. Now he would know she wasn't there, right? Because he was still dating her, or he was still in contact with her or whatever during this time. Anyways, whatever. Allegedly they had broke up, but I can't really believe anything he says, especially after I've seen the documentary, and it's completely different than what they presented at the trial. I have a big problem with that. But I'm sorry. Why was there no presentation to prove that in fact she wasn't there? Why did the police not investigate. Okay, so like here's some main things that the prosecutor could have used to slam dunk. If you're going to be a prosecutor, you want to prove to the jury that this woman did it. There's a couple things that would just solidify things in the juror's mind. One, the check allegedly signed by Liz that was presented, for after the death of Carrie, basically. You can take a handwriting analysis and prove that that wasn't altered, it wasn't forged, and that was in fact her signature. They didn't even bother to do that. Then there is the SD card, the pinging of to prove whether or not she was there. Did she lie? They didn't prove anything she lied other than just to say that, well, we don't believe you, and we're going to believe this theory. But when she says that she was somewhere else, that she left the day before with her kids, they could prove whether that was a lie. And they just didn't even bother. They didn't at any time, from what I've seen so far, maybe it's just not there, but it did happen.
I want to pause here because I want to say I believe the reason that the prosecution didn't bother with seeking that expert, because if she had a private attorney, a really good attorney, they would have expected a defense attorney to hire a handwriting analysis expert to debunk that she signed anything. So they would expect that. But of course, instead of expecting that, they expected that public defender wasn't going to do anything. And in fact, didn't.
They did not at any time try to see where were the phones pinging. So there was a phone from a message being sent to both
any prosecutor would know that's exactly what they
both Liz and Dave while they were still dating. They could have proven where that text message was coming from, no matter who was behind that text message. They could have proven this message at this time was pinging from here. Whoever was the owner of this phone sending this message, this is where that phone was when these messages were being sent. This person who's getting these messages, they could have proven that all three phones were at separate locations, or two of them were together and one of them was another location, and they don't. That is the potential investigation that was lacking, that was egregiously unfair to her. And they should have equally. Okay, so let me give you an example. I'm sure a lot of people, if you follow true crime, you look at the Oxygen Network. They do true crimes, and this lady comes in, and these are usually cold cases where they can't figure out who did it, or for whatever reason not prosecuting somebody, so they open up a cold case. And what they do is they put everybody who's a possible potential person of interest, not necessarily suspect, but person of interest, they put them all on the board, and they pro and con each and every person. Yes, this, no, this, possible this, yes, no, whatever. And they go through every possibility for each and every person until they rule them out. Okay. And now I don't agree with everything they've done. Like I've seen some murder cases that was like they allegedly suicide and they don't check for gun residue on the person's hand when they shot themselves, stuff like that. Things, it's not perfect, but their analysis process is pretty solid. And I don't see an analysis process in this case. All I see is a case for making a lot of money off of and convicting her in the public eye. And I don't see a process of equally looking at each person as a potential party and leaving gaping holes that are egregiously unfair, a highly politicized case, a horrible representation in court, and very lacking in the appeal court. And it just, I could see where easily a jury could convict this woman based on what was presented. But I have a problem with this man being the owner of the tablet, possession of the SD card with horrible evidence. He had possession of it. No explanation of why he had possession of the SD card. The fact that he could have easily had access to Liz's phone for the amount of time that he was dating her, and I think is very likely that she did in fact kill Carrie. But I feel that based on the things that are so lacking, I am not convinced that it couldn't have been Dave. I'm sorry. There's no reason to be jealous. That's my main thing that I'm stuck on is that she's with her man that allegedly she was jealous over. She's with her man for many months. All these text messages and emails was going on and on and on and on. She's with him. She's dating the guy, and Carrie's dead. If she had killed him, she would know he's dead, right? So why? Why would all these crazy stuff continue to go on? Maybe Dave was the one that was jealous because he knows about Todd. She got an exclusive, or he thinks it's exclusive. So the real triangle was between Dave, Todd, and Liz, in my mind. And I just think that people just take whatever is fed to them. And then, then after that point, then they just want to talk about it and make money, get clicks and views without even really looking a little bit further than what was presented. I have a problem with that. So I'm just I don't know, keep it civil if you want to comment on this. And I just think there's more to the story. And I just hope and I pray that if Liz did it, I hope that she will repent and acknowledge it. But if she didn't do it, I pray for lawyers who will really come out of the woodworks and present it. But what I pray for more than anything is this systemic discrimination against women. If you're gonna, I think that all police they need to equally put people on the board. Not go with what's the easiest way to convict somebody. I don't think that they fairly theorized each person. And maybe they did, and maybe they just don't want to discuss the fact that at some point maybe they did consider that it was Todd or that it was Dave. Maybe they did, and they just don't want to discuss that, but I don't think they did. I think that it's very problematic that they didn't ping at any time. And one really thing that bothered me that Dave said in the documentary was how he didn't call police when all these crazy threats are going on and his children are endangered. He doesn't, he's like, well, I'm not going to call the police, no, but excuse me, you're not going to call the police. And then, worse than that, was while this alleged Carrie was still alive, acting crazy, crazy Carrie as they have going on, he goes back onto that same website to find another girl. Why his children are currently endangered. I'm sorry. No, man. I look at him like he is so sus. I can't help it. That's just how I feel about it. So I don't know. What do you think? Was it really fair how they investigated?
So that's the end, and I would appreciate your comments. Um, if you're convinced it was her, that's fine. That's your opinion. You are certainly entitled to it. I just hope that people don't just take what the media feed you. At least keep your hearts and your minds open that many times there is information that is missing. And I have seen the comments. I've looked at, so I went and I searched on YouTube and different places online this case just to see what people were commenting. And the most of them just, oh my gosh, horrible story, bad thing to do, that kind of. But there are some that I saw. The first video that I clicked on was somebody who immediately had the same thoughts that I did, that thought that the guy was thought it was him. And that was the very first comment that I saw. So I know I'm not alone, right? But I just want people to consider that our justice system is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, okay? And our system is truly unfair towards women. It's a male population, largely male population. I'm a female veteran, and I'll tell you, I was a very tiny portion back in the 90s of women that served in the military. I know that the numbers have gone up since then, but when you have a system that's largely male oriented, it's just systemic. that they do have, either consciously or unconsciously, discriminatory practices towards women. And I think that whole scenario, I think they just really started suspecting her. And I understand with what was being presented, what was being made available, that there were things to make her look suspicious. But in a situation where you have cyber stalking and you have spoofed stuff and email and text messages, there was nothing concrete that proved that she it just I just think that they missed a lot. And if they had pinged things back then when a lot of those stuff was going on, and I think his not calling the cops, specifically in the documentary, when there was a lot of very serious threats going on, and he said multiple times in the documentary that he did not call the cops. It makes me wonder, did he not call the cops because they would have been able to ping stuff to find out that in fact the same phone pinging the victim was at the same location? I think he feared that they could figure it out. And that's why he didn't call the cops, because a certain amount of time may have passed to where they couldn't go back and investigate that. It's just too many holes that they didn't, I don't think they considered anybody but her. And I don't think that's a fair analysis, because once you get locked in on suspecting something, I think they just have tunnel vision. And I think they can miss things. I think in general, the analysis of suspects and person of interest should be fair, and it should be equal to all people, just to be careful if for anything. Take that detective who has her own show now, Oxygen, and she's really good at what she does. It's because she's so thorough, and she does go through every person possible so that they don't miss things. And I just don't think they did that in this case. And by not doing that, I just think it was unfair. And I do think they missed things. And I'm not convinced that it was her. I think it's quite possible based on what I heard in the phone call. But here's another thing that I didn't mention. When they were like telling Dave that he needs to go stay with Amy because they were suspecting her, they advised him to go stay with Amy. How do you not know that they told him that they were going to try to set her up by telling her when she's calling and saying, why isn't she arrested, when she's convinced that it was Amy? How do you know it wasn't him trying to make her to believe that it was Amy? Okay. But why on earth? They could have told him, look, we're going to do this. We're going to tell her such and such. And then, tell her that we need an actual confession and see if she'll actually send an email confession. If they told Dave their plan, he very well could have sent that email spoofing the location to trick the cops to thinking that it was her. I don't know whether or not they told Dave about what they were planning to try to get a confession from some imposter. Okay, so if they told him that they suspected her and for him to go stay with Amy to protect him and his kids, her and her kids or whatever, they very may likely have told him their plan to set her up to get a confession out of her. And he may very well be the one to send that confession email, pretending to be somebody else or whatever. Just saying. Anyways, that's it for this one. I hope you just keep your hearts open. All right.